It's my proud privilege again to come to JNU. I always love coming here. I love coming to JNU, ladies and gentlemen, because the moment I enter JNU and I see the wonderful infrastructure that JNU has, its wonderful roads, the wonderful elevators that work effortlessly, the wonderful staircases, the lovely canteen, the wonderful bathrooms. I work for a magazine called Fortune. I don't have any Fortune, but I work for a magazine called Fortune. And I believe that there's no place in this wonderful city of Delhi that turns you greater into a capitalist than stepping into JNU. So I humbly love coming to JNU because JNU tells me rather every time I step into it why capitalism works, why Adam Smith was right. Anyway, moving on. It is my proud privilege now to speak in front of people I have admired for a very, very long time, and it's of particular interest for me to speak here today because we are going to convert this entire session into Trayoka, the Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. The things that should not be spoken about in India, lo and behold, we talk about them in JNU. One is we've already spoken about Hinduism, must not ever talk about that. Second, we have spoken about, ladies and gentlemen, Israel, must not ever talk about that. And finally, it is my proud privilege to talk about the third Trayoka that must never be spoken of in India, which is about how to become rich. Because lo and behold, we must never talk about being rich.
I also committed the sacrilege of wanting to balance China.
That's right. Also that. So it's my proud privilege to sort of complete the Holy Trinity and talk about being rich. Being rich is an interesting thing, and economics is an interesting thing, especially for me because I have the privilege of being the youngest among this panel, and I am what I would call a liberalization's child, because my first formative understanding of this country happened post-liberalization. My first memories of India are in the 90s, right? My real memories are in the 90s. And I believe that there are two kinds of children in India, right? One is Midnight's children, right? People who sort of... And then there is Manmohan's children, or actually, should we say, Narasimha Rao's children, but people who came to fruition in liberalization, right? In my short career, I have found that there is a deep disdain in this idea that India can be a wealthy nation. Right? You must not be wealthy, and that's one. And I come from Calcutta, right? I mean, a man I admire deeply, Satyajit Ray, used to show India and all its myriad glory as a poor nation. And Bengalis like to revel in the fact that we are so poor, and what a wonderful thing it is to be poor. We were poor, we are poor, and lo and behold, we will continue to be poor. And being poor is our birthright, ladies and gentlemen. We will remain poor. Right? I don't like being poor. You know why? Here's the odd thing why I don't like being poor. Because like many of our dear friends in Delhi, have you noticed that in Delhi, also perhaps in this august institution, many people who talk about the glorious years of communist rule have actually never lived under communist rule. Oddly, have you noticed that? I had the misfortune, ladies and gentlemen, in the wonderful city of Calcutta, to have actually lived under communist rule. So I know what happens in communist rule, right? I mean, it's very difficult to tell what happens in communist rule sitting in the august institutions of Lutyens Delhi. Lutyens Delhi, I mean, when you talk about communism in Lutyens Delhi, it seems like holy, in the red colors sprinkling by, there are some gay frolicking men and women, and lo and behold, it is communism, right? It isn't quite like that. Because, I come from a city where my father was stabbed nearly and killed by the wonderful cadre of the Communist Party of India, Marxist. Because he couldn't pay what we in Bengal used to call chada, which is basically hafta collected by the cadre, right? That's why I don't like poverty. You know why? Because sitting in Lutyens Delhi, it's very difficult to understand what happens when you're poor, right? It's very tough. Because, there it is, that lovely, library that somebody built, which always has the same surname. There it is, another something else that somebody else built, which also has the same surname. So in that whole ecosystem, it's tough to, decide what happens when you're really poor. I, on the other hand, have had the good fortune of actually seeing poverty. There was a time in my family when my father didn't have enough money to buy bus tickets to go to his office because my grandparents died of cancer and he got wiped out, whatever little money he had as a government employee. So I know what it feels like to be poor, so I don't romanticize poverty, right? So it's very important for me to talk about economics because in my short career, about 10 years, two things have always been true in India, right? I mean, I've spent my entire career waiting for this. One is, I've been waiting for India to emerge because we've been emerging for a very long time, So we're like, okay, we're emerging and we're emerging again, and when we emerge, right? But in the nitty-gritty, so that's the macro. In the micro, we've been waiting for one more thing, and all of you are invited. I shall throw a party when this happens. Throughout my entire career of 10 years, I've been waiting for GST to happen. So when GST finally happens, we'll throw, all business journalists like me will throw a GST party, It'll be the goods and services. I mean, and if, lo and behold, depending on what happens on February the 10th, we might even have to start an actual party called the GST party in final elections, So we've been waiting for GST to happen. So I'm delighted that the new Prime Minister seems to have acted upon that. And goods and services tax would probably be something that I will see in my lifetime because, some of these things one doesn't see in one's lifetime. I was just in Australia. And let me talk about this one thing that I heard that made me particularly proud. See how instinctively I still say poor? Yeah. Made me particularly proud that India is now a net exporter of aid. For decades, a country which has only been seen as a recipient of aid today provides more aid outwards than it receives inwards. And you ask, why does the world see India differently? That is why the world sees India differently. My big problem with the Congress Party, I wrote a book called The Liberals about 3-4 years ago, where I argued extensively that the biggest problem with the Congress Party is that it never embraced truly the one good thing that one of its prime ministers had done. Not only did they cut away that prime minister completely from their pantheon, they refused to embrace the one thing that pulled 300 million people out of poverty in India. And had it not been for that one act of liberalization, I wouldn't be here sitting before you today. None of what we think today to be usual would have happened. So that's one of the most interesting things. And why did Mr. Modi win the election? I have a theory about why he won the election. I think Mr. Modi won the election because he was the first Prime Minister who actually came out there and said, we were rich once, we can be rich again. Because earlier kya hota tha? Pehle din, in the olden days, we used to say, Garibi hatao. I spent many years thinking about this phrase. Garibi hatao, And I was in Calcutta, I was a Bengali, speak very bad Hindi. So I thought it was an interesting phrase. I came to Delhi, I spent about a decade here, and I realized it's a very interesting phrase because गरीबी को हमेशा हटाया जाता है, कभी मिटाया नहीं जाता. Because अगर गरीबी मिट गई, so you always remove poverty, ladies and gentlemen. Strategically, you remove it so that you can benefit from it, but you never wipe it out. Because lo and behold, if you wipe out poverty, that will not be fun for you. Because as everybody knows, as intelligent, political, argumentative Indians, if the poor are gone, who will vote for us? Our entire politics is based on keeping the poor poor, and may they forever remain poor. So that people like you and me, coming out of all these institutions, can write books about them, can make films about them, can grandstand about them. Junkets. We can go to international junkets to talk about the poor. We can go win the literary awards talking about the poor. But the poor always remain poor. Because lo and behold, when the poor go away, our edifice crumbles. I have a theory that Lutyens' Delhi exists because of the poor. Because if the poor disappear, Lutyens' Delhi will disappear. So Lutyens' Delhi exists because the poor continue to live on, right? I think that's the big mental change that has happened because of this government. And I hope that mental change will continue in the future. The idea that we do not have to remain poor. We should not remain poor. We must not remain poor. And of course, does capitalism have its challenges? Oh my God, does it have challenges? Of course it has challenges. I mean, who am I to deny that it has challenges? But those challenges we can face. and we can build better laws, and we can structure schemes better. But we don't have to remain poor forever. I think that mental blockage is another big thing that we've finally crossed. Now I will now come to one point. Arun Jaitley's much maligned, much abused last budget. I found one thing, and I had long conversations last month with S. Gurumurthy, some of you might know him. There was one thing that seemed interesting to us, which I want to point out to you. It's tucked away, as all good things must be in bureaucratic documents in India, in para 102 in that document, right? Because lo and behold, if you put anything up front, there's a problem, right? So it's tucked away in para 102. Para 102 of Arun Jaitley's budget says this, and I quote. Just give me a moment, I just want to find this. Just bear with me for a second, please. It says SMEs form the backbone of our economy. They account for a large portion of our industrial output and employment. The bulk of service sector enterprises are also SMEs. Most of these SMEs are own account enterprises. It's a phrase that has never been used before, and I'll come to what own account enterprises mean. They are own account enterprises. Most importantly, a majority of these own account enterprises, also known as SMEs, are run by SCs, STs, and OBCs. Financing for this sector is of critical importance, especially as it benefits the weakest sections. There is a need to examine the financial architecture for this sector, and I propose to appoint a committee with representatives from the Finance Ministry, Ministry of MSME, and the RBI to give concrete suggestions in 3 months. It sounds like a bureaucratic paragraph, but let me try and explain why this paragraph is. Credit Suisse, which manages about $1.3 trillion in assets. Credit Suisse, I recommend that you read this very interesting report by Credit Suisse called India's Better Half. It talks about how 50% of India's GDP comes from what we've traditionally, almost deridingly called the informal sector, right? 50% of GDP. Now, let's come to another figure. It provides 50% of GDPs and 90% of jobs in India. In the last 25 years, this sector has contributed 3 or 4 times more jobs than the entire organized sector. So you take all of India's great companies, you put them all together, and this sector has contributed more jobs, not just more, 3 or 4 times more jobs than that entire sector put together. And we call it, informal sector, as if it sort of happens magically, like India grows in the night when the government is sleeping. But anyway, so this sector has always been derided. And I'm very interested in this sector because I believe, there was an Napoleon idea that India grows and India must have 1 million mutinies, right? And people ask me when I go abroad, why is it that India doesn't have an Arab Spring movement, right? Where is India's Arab Spring movement? And I believe that India's Arab Spring movement or India's 1 million mutinies happen every single day through millions of entrepreneurs who are the backbone of this country. That is India's 1 million mutinies now. That is the backbone of the Indian economy. And you know how much financing this economy gets, this great informal sector? It's barely 5%, maybe 7%. So this entire edifice of finance and lending that happens in India, this mammoth gargantuan section which creates millions of jobs just gets under 10% of financing in this country. That is a real shame. That is abysmal. That cannot be allowed to continue, because if that continues, there is no future for India. So unless you fix this financing issue, India cannot grow, India cannot become. So that's a very important thing, I think, that this focus will bring. This entire, do you know how much of our trade and manufacturing and services this informal economy brings? It brings 2/3 of all the trade that India does. 2/3 of all trade is done by this informal sector. 1/4 of all manufacturing is done by this informal sector. These are massive numbers. We began talking about data. These are massive, massive numbers, right? And, the most amazing thing about this is, we've always believed that, caste is a terrible problem. I don't believe in caste. I've never believed in caste. As long as I live, I will not believe in caste. It's a terrible, terrible problem. But I believe one of the most powerful ways of fighting caste is economics. Economics is a great, and I'm not saying there are not other ways of fighting caste, there are, and they're powerful and they should be used, but economics is a really powerful idea. And economics, so when we say 2/3 of this entire informal sector, all these millions of entrepreneurs, these are enterprises owned by SC, ST, OBCs, right? And if you empower this sector, the money goes directly in the hands of the people who you want to bring up in the great social chain of India. That's the magic of economics. It's, we keep talking about targeting. I've been hearing about this word targeting. How do you target welfare? And Narega, Sujit Bhalla has pointed out that Narega funds, less than 50% of Narega funds ever reach Narega recipients, right? So this whole targeting thing that we talk about, I believe the private sector and the informal economy has the best potential to actually target properly, where you can actually put money in the hands of people. And I think if we work on that, on those principles, it would be a magical moment from India. I will end by saying this one more thing. The whole of the, when I was in CNBC in Bombay, we used to laugh about this, that the whole of the Indian stock market is essentially run by 200 guys sitting in South Bombay, right? That's all there is. And it's those same guys, they play the markets, they come out, they have a drink in one of those bars, and that's the Indian stock market. The Indian stock market does not represent maybe a few percentage points, if that, of our real economy, right? And this is a magical moment where we can transform all of that. Let's come to Make in India, right? Make in India is another big slogan that this government has. How will you make in India unless you have people who will do the making, right? And unless you empower these millions of entrepreneurs who will actually be doing the making, you will never have Make in India, right? And that's why I believe empowering this economy is one of the most powerful things that the government can do, and I'm hoping that the government will do. The signs are there, because those are the people, those are the entrepreneurs who will actually make in India. Look, we've destroyed, you have to understand the big difference, according to me at least, in my humble opinion, between India and China is that Mao's Great Leap Forward destroyed China's cultural heritage. And with culture, because I'm a student of economics, with cultural heritage, destroyed China's heritage of handwork. India is one of the last remaining places in the world where handwork is still important and still flourishes. Every time you go to, as we all know that, everything you say in French sounds cooler, right? Even if they've used it, sounds cooler. Every time you go to Paris, they say, haute couture, da, 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 da. They celebrate their handwork, and they've created a $10 billion business out of handwork. And I'm not only talking about one company. The entire quote-unquote luxury goods industry in Paris would be hundreds of billions of dollars, right? They've created an entire industry out of handwork. And what do we do about our handwork? When I used to write about these things, I used to hear that in London and Paris that bespoke is an important thing. Bespoke jibara. Our countries have bespoke. You go to Savile Row and they'll tell you, Savile Row will tell you that you must pay £3,000 for this suit because it is bespoke. Right? You have to come for like 6 sittings and they'll measure you, and if you're fat they'll tell you lose some weight and whatever, right? So bespoke is really important. And I came back and thought, yaar, ye to bada cool hai, ye bespoke. India has only ever had bespoke. Every bloody darzi in our country used to do bespoke only. What did we have apart from bespoke? We had nothing but bespoke. But they're branded bespoke. You go to Savile Row, people land in, and last time I was in London a few months ago, they told me now Russian oligarchs are flying in their private jets to London to get the bespoke service of Savile Row. Right? But in India, we've never branded anything. Right? The same auntie in Delhi who will pay whatever they will pay for Louis Vuitton will then go and try and buy a patola sari on the cheap. We will never make in India like this. It's not possible. In order for us to make in India, fundamentally something has to change from within. I have a theory that Indians love brand. They say, oh, Calvin Klein, whatever. Because we are so poorly branded as a country. If you permit me to say this in Hindi, हमारी खुद की औकात ही नहीं है यार, तो हम हमेशा किसी और की औकात ढूंढते हैं कि जी मैं लुई विटॉन खरीद लिया तो मेरी औकात नहीं, मैं ये ज़ारा पहन लिया तो मेरी औकात, प्राडा का बैग ले लिया तो मेरी औकात नहीं, क्योंकि हमारे देश का ही कोई औकात नहीं. right? Why? Because we've always been told that we are poor. Rajiv Malhotra says, हमारा तो concept ही है, for all these years we've been taught कि हमारा तो civilization upgrade होता चला है. We were rubbish. एक round of invasions happened, we upgraded. Chalo, we suddenly became cooler. Another round of invasion happened, we became even cooler. हम सब अंग्रेज बन गए. We all became like in Calcutta anyway, in the clubs of Calcutta, they all think they're Englishmen. They're the last final dying Englishmen. Right? When they die, the empire will be over. Right? So I leave you with that thought, ladies and gentlemen, that I believe that this government has started on a good platform for 2 or 3 reasons, as I pointed out. I believe that there has to be a paradigm shift in our mind from our idea of being inherently a poor country to a country which was very wealthy at one point and can be wealthy again, powerful again. That's number one. Number two, I believe we do not and should not continue to neglect a critical sector of our economy and millions of entrepreneurs who are the backbone, who are the soul of this economy, and that's how we will take the future and grow in the future. And finally, I really believe there can be no make in India unless that is made in our head. It has to be first made in our head. The brand first has to be built in our head. And unless that happens, there can be no make in India. I think, therefore, this government has made a good start. I wish it luck, and I hope it succeeds. Thank you very much, ladies.